Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we explore convenient yet effective shortcuts that will help you get ahead and move forward faster by becoming a better leader. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rimbach.
Need a powerful and entertaining way to ignite your next conference, retreat, or team building session? My keynotes don't include magic, but they do have the power to help your attendees take a leap forward by putting emotional intelligence into their employee engagement, and customer-centric leadership practices. So bring the infotainment creativity of the Fast Leader Show to your next event, and I'll help your attendees get over the hump now. Go to beyondmorale.com/speaking to learn more. Okay, Fast Leader Legion, today I'm excited because the guest that I have on the show today has big ideas for a big problem that we all face. Steve Mariotti is a native son of Flint, Michigan, and where he grew up with his younger brother, Jack. Steve received his undergrad in business economics and his master's from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. His primary interest in school was entrepreneurship, as he had been unable to get a job as a teenager in Flint and started 7 different businesses to fund his education. After receiving his MBA, Steve was appointed to the Treasury Analyst for South Africa for Ford Motor Company, where he led the internal effort to prohibit Ford from selling surveillance equipment to the racist government of South Africa. Ford adopted Steve's recommendations, and their policy of not selling to non-democratic governments remains in effect to this day. In 1982, Steve was mugged by a group of youths armed with knives. After seeing a therapist, he was advised to become a public high school teacher in New York City's roughest neighborhoods as part of his therapy. So Steve decided to leave a successful business career to become a teacher. On his first day of teaching special education students in the worst school in New York City, which was back in March 6, 1982, his post-traumatic stress disorder from the mugging disappeared, and he knew he had found his life's work. Steve discovered he could reach even his most troubled students by teaching them to run small businesses. In 1987, he founded the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship to bring entrepreneurship education to low-income youth. Since then, more than 700,000 students in 22 states and 12 countries have graduated from NFTE programs. Steve's vision is that every low-income youth will be taught the basics of starting a business so they will have an opportunity to escape poverty. Steve has authored 30 books, including an Entrepreneur's Manifesto. Over 10 million of Steve's books are in print and used in over 30 different countries. Steve is the Fellow of Entrepreneur Education for the PhilaU Center for Entrepreneurship at Philadelphia University. Steve currently lives in Princeton, New Jersey, where he enjoys hiking, playing chess, and adding to his collection of more than 7,000 rare books. Steve Mariotti, are you ready to help us get over the hump?
Yes, I'm glad to be on the show, Jim. Thank you.
And thanks for being here. I've given our listeners a little bit about you, but can you tell us what your current passion is so that we can get to know you even better?
Absolutely. I'm spend my time reading and writing on the issue of entrepreneurship and what happens to entrepreneurs during times of emergencies such as wars and natural disasters, and how we can help entrepreneurs be peacekeepers and help them connect with one another around the world and create a global movement of entrepreneurs that are interconnected and actually act as a force for good globally, which I've always believed.
Steve, your book, when I started really reading into the book, An Entrepreneur's Manifesto, I started really coming to the realization that I don't think the title matches what's inside, because it has such a huge foretelling as well as, research of the past on the impact of business and entrepreneurship in society as a whole. And I mean, for me, you even talk about, that everybody could be taught entrepreneurship. And I have to say I'm a skeptic on that, but how is that possible?
I think that every human being has within them the ability to find a comparative advantage, and that every human being is basically always in business for themselves. Even if you're working at the post office, that your life is to determine how to best use your resources, time, energy, knowledge, And through the concept that F.A. Hayek developed, who won the Nobel Prize in 1974, I was fortunate enough to be his assistant, and he came up with the idea that each human being has unique knowledge of time and space. And with that knowledge, you can make a livelihood, either as self-employed or working for someone else. And I don't think the barrier between being a worker and an entrepreneur or owner or capitalist is legitimate. I think we're always basically trying to maximize our revenue financially and intellectually and psychically, and trying to minimize our costs. So I think it's very healthy to teach people to be thinking of themselves as entrepreneurs or business people.
You know, you bring up a very interesting point, because the use of part-time help, contract labor, and even outsourcing is just going to continue to grow. And I have a lot of our listeners that are in customer care and customer experience. So when you think about customer service, a lot of companies are actually taking on those folks as contract workers, and they have to bring things with them. So learning those entrepreneurial skills earlier on would be important for those folks to be successful and essentially go where they want to go.
Absolutely. That's been my whole career of 35 years, is to get an international movement for every country in the world so that every child in the world will learn how to start a business before they graduate from high school. Some point in their career, that will pay off. If you have a boss that doesn't like you, or if you have a company that wants to use contractors, or if you want to try to make more money or have flexible hours, the highest rate of business formation in the world today are American women. And also the happiest people in the world today are American women entrepreneurs.
You know, that brings up a really interesting point when you start talking about this younger generation really wanting to make an impact on the world. And a lot of folks, I think, have very important, thoughts in regards to making that impact, but they don't have the funding behind them to really make a difference. And I think if you brought the two together, it could make a bigger difference for all of us.
Absolutely. I think one of the most important things to teach at a young age is the concept of capital. How do you save capital? How do you make it grow? And just as important, how do you get other people to invest in you? There's millions of ideas that could improve the world. And many times people are taught to be afraid to ask for help, or they don't know how to put together a 2-page business proposal, or all the little nuances of business ease or business language, which you can learn in 100 hours. So some of the great minds in the world never shine, and it hurts the world because their idea dies with them. So there's something about business and its ability to enhance people's productivity, to get things done, to help them psychologically, and most important, to develop ideas and businesses that help other people in their communities.
It's really interesting as you were talking. Thanks for sharing that. I started thinking about a lot of organizations today that are trying to instill more of that entrepreneurial mindset within their own workforce. I mean, these are people unemployed and they want them to bring more innovation and things like that to the table. But based on what you're saying is that they're not taught those things when they're younger and growing up. I mean, so right. It's a missing skill. Yet it can be learned. So how do we actually make this change? But I think you also, before I go there, I think that's what the book is about. But you talk about coordinated support within the book. What is that?
Coordinated support really means building communities that support creativity, individualism, ideas, the right to fail, the right to be successful. Building a community that is supportive of the entrepreneurial process, the uniqueness of it, the many failures of it. And the beauty of that is that you have a community that understands it and keeps with it. And, I really point to a great example is Israel. I was Nifty went to Israel in 1993. And at that time, the majority of the leaders of Israel, in my opinion, were socialists, were, based on the original Israeli Bella's and Stern and those guys' vision of 48, which is a very socialist state ownership, very regimented society. And in 1993, and I think it was in a small part because Nifty came, but there was a young Israeli entrepreneur who hit a huge home run and went public on the New York Stock Exchange, I believe. And the culture began to change. And now Israel is created a community that I think is the most pro-entrepreneurial community in the world. And they have 34% of the new companies on NASDAQ were founded by Israelis. So it shows you, in a 22-year period, one generation, you can get everything, you can go from doing everything wrong to everything right. And that's the power of creation of a community and the power of ideas, the power of vision, having a strategy and tactics. And I want us to do that right here in America, particularly in low-income communities that would benefit the most from a renaissance of entrepreneurship.
I mean, I definitely can see that would be a benefit to those areas, but it's almost like it's really tossed across the entire economic spectrum, because, in one of your articles on Huffington Post, you talked about how there's more college graduates that are living at home now than ever before because there's no jobs for them. And that universities are failing them. And
yes.
And you also had mentioned something where by 2030, 3 out of 5 people living in cities will be under the age of 18. We have a huge employment problem that's going to continue to get bigger.
It's very scary. And it's much worse in the Middle East and certain parts of Africa. Certain parts of Africa are booming. Certain parts have the same problems the Middle East and we do. And we've got to start talking about it and thinking of solutions. But, getting our tax code right. We have a corrupt and, just evil tax code. I wouldn't use those words if I didn't actually believe them. But, it's 4,800 pages with another 80,000 pages of laws behind that you have to check as you're reading through the tax code, and we've got to get rid of that, make it simple, fair, and in my opinion, flat. We've got to get rid of all regulations that don't help people with health and safety, but rather prevent competition. We've got to change our culture, particularly in the art world, where so often the entrepreneur is portrayed as a negative, mean, dishonest person. Something like 90% of the heroes in movies and TVs, villains are small businessmen or large businessmen, and it's in women too. And it's a terrible message to send to all children, but particularly children in poverty. So I think in my generation, certainly in a decade, we can turn this around. We get the tax code right. We grow at 5%. We get the regulations right. We grow at 7%. We get universal ownership and entrepreneurship education in every school in America, and we'll grow at 10%. That means we double every 7 years. And that means we'll eliminate poverty in about 14 years in America. And if we can do it here, we can do it anywhere in the world. No one should have to grow up in poverty within the next 25 years. We should wipe poverty out of this world.
And that's an action-based way of wiping poverty out that's proactive instead of continuing to contribute to entitlement programs. And I love that big thinking. Now, obviously, with the people who you've had the opportunity to be mentored by and work with, and some of the experiences that you've had a lot of inspiration in your life, and you're an inspirational person yourself. And oftentimes on the show, we look to quotes and that we share. And so is there a quote or two that you can share that gives you that inspiration?
Yes. Dear God, give me an unremitting sense of purpose. And my second one is never, 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 never compete. Find out what everybody else is doing, then don't do it. Create.
Those are two very good ones, Steve.
Thank you.
Now, I thank you for sharing. I know also, even reading in the book, that you've had several humps to get over, and I think that's probably why you are the person you are today. Is there a story that you can share with us when you had to get over a hump?
Absolutely. In 1981, I was in the business of import-export, which I was very good at, and I enjoyed it. And I went out for a jog in September of 81 in New York City along the East River, broad daylight, and 5 or 6 young men, couldn't be more than 13 years old, attacked me with weapons, knives, and humiliated me in front of my girlfriend, and also robbed me. And it was, very humiliating and very, very scary. And I got post-traumatic stress disorder, which is, anybody who has had it, it's just horrible. It basically takes over your mind, and all you think of are the moments that were syringed into your mind by the trauma and the stress of those moments. So for 6 months, I was pretty unable to do anything. It was a very difficult time in my life. And my friend took me to a psychologist who was very famous at that time, named Albert Ellis, and taught me how to change the sentences in my mind. So instead of being humiliated and a victim of a mugging in front of your girlfriend in broad daylight, I became a survivor, a hero who escaped 5, 6 young men with knives and saved my girlfriend. And I felt totally better within an hour. And then the next day, I became a special ed teacher as part of the therapy in Boys and Girls High School in Brooklyn, New York, which was at that time the most difficult high school. They'd had 2 children who had been shot there. None of the teachers wanted to go, so they were very glad that I would go. And I just walked in, and my post-traumatic stress disorder was totally gone. I never thought of it in a painful way again. And I found that I enjoyed talking to children that were disconnected ultimately from themselves and from God and from a craft where they could make a living. And that became my life's work. That was in 81, and I've been doing it for 35 years, thinking about how to help people achieve their life through the skills of thinking about ownership, entrepreneurship, self-reliance, planning, goals, action, being proactive, understanding money, respecting money, and most important, the golden rule is where you really are successful. Try to help other human beings get what they want. Treat them the way you want to be treated, and most of the dreams of your life will come true.
What you've been able to accomplish as a result of that event, it's almost a blessing that it happened to you. And I know that may sound strange.
It is a blessing. It is, all spiritual, I think. So, but it was a major blessing.
So even in the book, you shared a couple of some pretty amazing success stories that have come out of this particular program. Can you share one of those with us?
Absolutely. Our children, as in whole, the 700,000 become more business literate, become aware of time preference. They see further in the future. And most important, 99.5% of them, which means 199 out of 200, would recommend it highly without qualification to their best friend. So to me, what the child says is very important. We have many success stories around the world. We've recreated cultures in certain countries. We've recreated cultures in certain cities. The story I like most is a student of mine that I had in 1988, and his name was Malik Armstead, and his business is in New York City. And it's a restaurant, and he started it in 93. I went to the neighborhood It's a very difficult. It was a very difficult neighborhood in Brooklyn, and I went and looked at the neighborhood, and I said, Malik, don't do it. It's too rough. I felt nervous there during the day, which is always a bad sign. And he said, absolutely not. I'm going to do it. And sure enough, within 8 years, he owned the whole 2 blocks as one of the most successful restaurants in Brooklyn, and has created, I think, 71 jobs. And the neighborhood's changed. You got these young people starting businesses. They come over and talk to him like a senior fellow. He's used venture capital to get young people in businesses. He's got kids to college. He sponsors sports teams. One entrepreneur over a lifetime can have a huge impact on other human beings. And you don't have to be the Bill Gates or the Steve Jobs or Michael Dells. You can be just in your community and affect thousands of lives over your career. It's a beautiful way to make a living.
So, Steve, that was a great story, but you got to tell us the name of the restaurant.
It's called 5 Spot Soul Food.
Okay, make sure, Fast Leader Legion, if you ever get down that, so Brooklyn, right?
Yes, it's at 459 Myrtle Avenue. And again, the name is 5 Spot Soul Food. You'll love it. And he's one of the New York City's top entrepreneurs. I'm very proud of him.
Okay, Fast Leader Legion, if you ever get down to Brooklyn, make sure you go see Malik and tell him Steve sent you. Steve, now I know that you've got a lot of different things that are going on. I mean, your mission, what you're doing with the Entrepreneurial Center and all of those things, you're writing on HuffPost. I want to help you as much as I possibly can, because I see that your positive method and solution for addressing some of these big societal problems is something that seems just so simple, but just needs an extra push. How can, if you were to give a recommendation to listeners on how to help make this change happen, what would be your advice?
Number one, I would begin to talk to the local school districts, particularly if you have children, and say, what is our program to teach kids how to start businesses, and see what they say. Most won't have one, but they will if local community people talk about it. 90% is exposure. Many, many teachers have part-time businesses, so you have a wealth of genius within the school. And tragically, under Common Core, in this whole centralization of the state over a monopoly public school system has made a lot of people's unique knowledges not of value in the school system. So you'll have a great teacher who's run an auto mechanic shop after school for the last 25 years. And 10 years ago, that would be part of his curriculum. Every kid would come out knowing about basic business because that's what he did, even if he was an English or science teacher. But now the standardization of curriculum really benefits no one. I think it was a major error. And it's not where you win your Nobel Prizes. It's not where you generate great wealth. And I would encourage people to talk to their local school systems. If they have the time and the money to run for office, is the most important thing you can do other than starting your own business to change society.
When you start thinking about all the things that you have on your plate, I mean, and I know there's a lot, but if you were to talk about one being a goal that you wanted to push over, what would it be?
My biggest goal right now is to capture the stories of entrepreneurs who have stayed alive and helped other people through war and natural disaster. And how did they do it? What entrepreneurial mind frame did they have to get through absolute horrors of things that have happened? And they kept going. When you read history, the entrepreneur is invisible. You can't, Churchill, who I've read everything he's ever written, I'm a big fan, but he's got exactly 3 sentences on small businesses out of 3.8 million published words, and he won the Nobel Prize for Literature. And that's true with almost everybody that has won the Nobel Prize in literature or any major writer. They take the entrepreneur out of history and they substitute him in for large government leaders, Stalin, Hitler, Mao, our own George Washington, that I'm a huge fan of. But they don't define the entrepreneur in those societies. And it's the entrepreneur that creates the wealth, gets things done, supplies the socks. And if we could raise the consciousness of the entrepreneur, similar that Betty Friedan did with raising the consciousness of women in 1963 with her pioneering work, or Martin Luther King did with the African American community around liberty and voting, and Robert Kennedy did, and George Washington did, and Gandhi and Muhammad Yunus. I would like to be one of many raising the self-esteem, the consciousness of small entrepreneurs and big entrepreneurs, and view it as one community.
And the Fast Leader Legion wishes you the very best. Now, before we move on, let's get a quick word from our sponsor. The number one thing that contributes to customer loyalty is emotions. So move onward and upward faster by gaining significantly deeper insight and understanding of your customer journey and personas with emotional intelligence. With your empathy mapping workshop, you'll learn how to evoke and influence the right customer emotions that generate improved customer loyalty and reduce your cost to operate. Get over your emotional hump now by going to empathymapping.com to learn more. All right, here we go, Fast Leader Legion. It's time for the Hump Day Hoedown. Okay, Steve, the Hump Day Hoedown is the part of our show where you give us good insights fast. So I'm going to ask you several questions, and your job is to give us robust yet rapid responses that are going to help us move onward and upward faster. Steve Mariotti, are you ready to hoedown?
I'm ready.
All right. So what do you think is holding you back from being an even better leader today?
Organization.
What is the best leadership advice you have ever received?
Integrity.
What is one of your secrets that you believe contributes to your success?
Listening.
What do you feel is one of your best tools that helps you lead in business or life?
Reading a book a week.
On that note, is there a book that you'd recommend to our listeners? And it could be from any genre. Of course, we're going to provide a link to an entrepreneur's manifesto, but what book would you recommend beyond that?
The best book ever written for entrepreneurs is The Power of the Subconscious by Murphy, published in 1963.
Okay, Fast Leader Legion, you can find links to that and other bonus information from today's show by going to fastleader.net/Steve Mariotti. Okay, Steve, this is my last Hump Day Hoedown question. Imagine you were given the opportunity to go back to the age of 25, and you've been given the opportunity to take the knowledge and skills that you have now back with you. But you can't take everything back. You can only choose one. So what skill or piece of knowledge would you take back with you, and why?
Empathy. The ability to try to understand how people feel and what I can do to help them. Because that, for me, has been the best way to help people and has created great happiness for me and enough wealth so that I can live comfortably.
Steve, it was an honor to spend time with you today. Can you please share with the Fast Leader Legion how they can connect with you?
Absolutely. Steve Mariotti at gmail.com is my email, and Steve Mariotti partners.com is my website.
Steve Mariotti, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. The Fast Leader Legion honors you and thanks you for helping us get over the hump. Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.